Welcome to the How to Podcast series. Glad to be back with you again. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be a part of this community and to catch a few tips here and there about creating your own podcast and how to make it better or how to start. Thanks for being a part of this. Today we're going to talk about how to create a podcast template and why it's important to have a guide and a template for what you do for your podcast right here on the How to Podcast series. Here we go. So why should I have a podcast template? Well, if you think about this, people are listening to your podcast. Maybe they're going right back to episode 1 and catching up to where you are today. So they might be going back through your library. And as much as possible, I would say to put in some effort at the beginning to have a consistent show and episodes that sound and have the same format over a period of time. A lot of people say that your first few podcast episodes are not going to be the greatest. Now, with the amount of knowledge and wisdom and YouTube videos and podcasts about podcasts and all these different resources available to you, I think that's kind of a cop-out in the sense that there's so much knowledge out there that your first episodes don't have to necessarily be the worst. And if they're unstructured and every podcast episode is different from the last, it's a little hard for a customer, in this sense, your podcast listener, to commit to a podcast when they don't know what's happening next. It might be an advantage to some people. But in general terms, I would like for you to consider that a podcast should have a similar theme and expected things that are going to happen during the episode. Think of your favorite TV show, think of your favorite movie, think of the news on television. They kind of go through a pattern and they take you on a journey. And it's typically, the content might be different, but it's typically the same format from episode to episode. Keep it in mind. Try it. See what you think. But creating a podcast template, you can easily improve your workflow just by creating a template for each podcast episode. This template should determine the podcast format. So are you an interview-based podcast? Are you a solo podcast? Are you a co-hosted podcast? What kind of podcast are you? This template will help you to kind of nail that all down. And it will include pre-recorded podcast intros and outros. For us, we recorded our podcast intro and outros on our other 4 podcasts. And we have them saved as a template in Audacity, which is what we use to mix and master our podcasts. It's free software. Put a link down below for you as well, so you can check it out. But we use Audacity, so we just have this built in on our podcast template in Audacity for recording, and we just drop in the episode in between the intro and outro. Saves a lot of work. We're not recording new intros and outros every time. Some people prefer to do that. It's completely up to you. There's really not a right or wrong answer. If you want to save time and invest time in other areas of your podcast, use an intro, outro, pre-recorded snippet and just leave it in your editing software or whatever you're using. Again, we use Audacity. We really like it. To help set expectations for your listener, the best podcasts introduce their podcast template right out of the gate, right from the beginning, right with the first episode. You can always introduce or explore new templates for your podcast in the future, but consider maintaining the same template for each episode for a period of time so that's not jarring for your listener as you explore new avenues. So a podcast template, very simple to do. Are you going to start off with music, a welcome intro, and then into the podcast? Are you going to forego the music altogether and jump right into the content? Figure out how you want to structure your episodes. How long are they going to be? How often are these podcast episodes coming out? All of these things help to build a loyal listener base and keep them in the loop. Good example, my wife and I do a podcast about living our side hustle. And both of us got sick for a month-ish. And we didn't have recordable voices during that time. We were fine, but our voices weren't up to par and ready for recording. So instead of putting out something that we would not be pleased with, we took the month off and got better. So our podcast listeners are like, where'd you guys go? So being consistent is very important, but people understand. And we did a recent episode to let people know we're back. Apologize for our disappearance for a month as we were ill, but happy to be back and bring them up to speed again. So you will take a little bit of a hit. Your listeners are expecting weekly, daily, monthly, every second week. They're expecting something from you based on your release schedule. Stick with it as much as you can. Be realistic and try your best to reach out and build that community. A lot more coming up for you here on the How to Podcast series. Again, we are building a community of podcasters who are all in the same boat. We're new. We've been doing this for a little while. We're not at that magic high number of downloads. We're not making tons of money in our podcast, but we are starting out and we're just kind of building our platform. And if that's you and you feel like you're a little bit alone in the process, come over and join our community. We are building this together. And the idea behind this is that we're going to share our podcast with the group. The group is going to give us input. They're going to give us support. They're going to challenge us. And at the same time, they're also going to go listen to our podcast, rate and review, help us grow. They're going to share our podcast. And we get a chance to actually be the featured podcast for the month. And the rest of the group members get a chance to support you and build you up as a podcaster. So don't do it alone. There's no reason to do it alone. And the beauty of all this, especially for new podcasters who don't have a lot of money or not making money at their podcast yet, this whole group is free. Reach out to us. The links will be in the show notes. And as podcasters, you know what show notes are. Go there, check them out, click the links, and send us a message. If you're interested, let's get you into the community and let's help build your podcast along with other people doing the same thing you are. Thanks for listening. Catch you on the next one.